The Democrats lost big in 2024 because they lacked a real fighter who could speak to the average American. What if their 2028 answer is sitting right in front of them? What if they already have their own version of Donald Trump, a political outsider, someone who has built his brand in a totally different arena, but has recently stepped into political debates? What if that person is ready to take the reins after Trump leaves office? In Stephen A. Smith, that's exactly what they have. And as a Republican, I'm telling you that the Democrats would be smart to make that happen. The Stephen A. Trump comparison may seem like a bit of a far-fetched idea, but Trump proved that there's a massive appetite for an outsider who speaks directly to the average American, someone who cuts through 50 years of canned political talking points and calls out the craziness on both sides. Stephen A. Smith, whether he knows it or not, is already playing that same role for the left. We all know him as ESPN's loudest voice with the most passionate takes on TV.
This man was a bona fide scrub. He can't play.
But off the set, Stephen A. has a massive audience of over 6 million followers, hosts his own podcast where he regularly talks about politics. He's friends with the biggest Fox News personality in Sean Hannity and has a friendly relationship with Ben Shapiro. He's able to do what no other Democrat can do right now: break through the clutter and speak to people on both sides. Plus, the middle American who feels disenfranchised by the modern political circus. When Stephen A. talks politics, he does so not through a political lens trying to toe the line of what's acceptable by the party brass. He does so by speaking common sense. For proof, look at him with Dave Rubin a couple of weeks ago, blasting Democrats who stayed seated when Trump challenged them to stand for putting American citizens first over illegal immigrants.
He's playing them like a fiddle. He knows they're not going to stand up. He knows how bad it's going to make them look. I would have called this bluff, and I would have stood up and I would have said, "You're damn right," because the bottom line is, you got to remember, he's the key words that came out of his mouth. He said American citizens. So there are plenty of people who are American citizens who are of the same ethnic consent, consent as the immigrants and migrants are. You have people who are Hispanics. You have people who are wherever they're from. It could be Venezuela, it could be Guatemala, it could be Mexico, it could be anywhere. You understand? Who are American citizens. So when he said American citizens and American citizens first of all, that's the right thing because it should be American citizens first, number one. And number two, for people on the left, some of them, not most, not all, but some of them coming out and saying that what he said was racist. Well, how?
That sort of clarity coming from the left would be a much needed breath of fresh air for them. While Stephen A. did use the word undocumented later in that clip, his sentiment was clear. Don't get hung up by the terminology, just focus on whether Americans are being put first. By simply saying that, he's telling the left to stop being the language police that most Americans are absolutely sick of. He speaks to the people, not the party elites. And it's not just the language policing that he pushes back on. He also goes against the most extreme leftist social ideas. Here's him going after Gavin Newsom's stance that kids should be able to transition without parental consent.
Newsom, everybody talked about, you need to move to the center to some degree. Look at it that way. What do? 2 weeks later, you're seeing on TV talking about when it comes to transgenders, transitioning from male to female, even if they're children, you really have no problem with that, with them doing such a thing without parental consent. I've said this to numerous people who would listen. If my child is underage, you can't come to my child to tell my child to walk down the street to the store without my permission. How in God's name you think you can do something that serious without parental consent?
They used to not let them go to a PG-13.
Are you kidding me? That is just utterly ridiculous. That kind of soundbite is going to be held against him. So I think that
Stephen A.'s instincts are in line with the majority of Americans. He basically says, hold up, no way am I letting you do that to my kid. Polls show that around 80% of Americans agree with him, but I would venture to guess that when it really comes down to it, not just in some questionnaire that means nothing, but if it were really happening to someone in real life, over 95% of Americans would agree with him on that point. And here's him laying out exactly what is wrong with the other potential 2028 Democrat candidates.
Kamala Harris, that's where you come from. You didn't even want to run for the governor's seat in California. You should have been able to win that one. You didn't want that. Okay, we saw what happened during the election. You had 107 days. Biden put you at a disadvantage. That's all true. But your interview on The View sealed your fate. When they asked you, is there anything that you would do differently than Biden? You're like, no, I can't think of anything. Nobody's letting that go. Pete Buttigieg, as I said on Real Time with Bill Maher, he doesn't move us. Yeah. He just doesn't move us. It's just that simple. All right. And then you have Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC. I respect her. I respect her passion. I respect what she tries to do for a constituency in the Bronx, New York. That clip of her in Munich was one of the most embarrassing videos we may have seen.
Would and should the U.S. actually commit U.S. troops to defend Taiwan if China were to move?
I think that this is such a, I think that this is a, this is of course a a very long-standing.
Listen, when Mitch McConnell, the former Senate Majority Leader, froze, ladies and gentlemen, we will wonder whether or not he had a stroke. We know he's old. We know there are health issues. That is a vibrant young lady. That is AOC.
Yeah.
Okay? That was not a health issue. You were not prepared. You did not know what you were talking about. And the world saw it now.
You can quibble with some of his reasoning there. I personally think that Kamala would have done even worse if she had more time on the campaign trail. She topped out in the polling early on in her candidacy and then just plummeted as time went on. But his bigger point is dead on. These candidates all have major flaws, and they have already exposed those flaws to the American people. Just like Trump in 2016, Stephen A. is willing to speak out against his own party members. He'll speak candidly about why each is bad for the country, or why each has no shot at winning a general election. Stephen A. definitely isn't going to go around throwing out random insults like Trump did, but he will honestly, fairly, in a way that connects with the blue-collar, middle-class American, call out the insanity of his own side. And that's exactly why Democrats should seriously consider him. The average American wants someone to deliver on common sense social policy. Stephen A. brings that while lacking any of the baggage that the members of the far left carry. He already has a huge platform. He checks the box for those who want a minority candidate, and he would absolutely win back the minority voters who fled to Trump in the last election. He is a slam dunk candidate when it comes to those things. Now, yes, Stephen A. is light on economic and foreign policy details at this point, but so was Trump in 2016. Both are outsiders who speak mostly on cultural issues. Stephen A. has described himself as fiscally conservative, but has also heavily criticized our healthcare system. And let's be real here, fiscal conservatism is tough in today's reality, especially when you consider yourself socially liberal like Stephen A. Supporting more healthcare coverage, or help for the poor, or even things that we all agree on, like more help for veterans, it all requires spending. Even Donald Trump has increased spending every year. That's just the state of politics right now. Democrats shouldn't be scared off just because Stephen A. is not out there yelling tax the rich every 5 minutes. The left has ridden that slogan train for 2 decades without the wins that they want. Let him bring common sense instincts and reset the party. Stephen A.'s lack of foreign policy prescriptions is even less of a problem. Despite foreign policy being, in my view, the clearest tell of whether a president is smart or not, most Americans vote with their bank account and whether life feels normal and safe. Foreign policy is an afterthought for everyone except for folks like me who just geek out on this stuff for fun. So as long as the economy isn't booming come election time, Stephen A. could win the economic issues by articulating just a couple of differences from Trump, like ditching tariffs to let businesses thrive. That pitch alone might sway enough swing voters. His lack of deep experience here isn't a bug, it's a feature. He can simply say, look, I've been a Democrat my whole life, watching from the outside. I've seen what works and what doesn't, and I'll take the best from both sides and build policies that actually help regular people. No promising the moon, no cartoon villain talk about the rich, just straightforward, good-natured economics. That's all he needs. But if Democrats run another insider like Newsom or AOC, they're chained to their own records. They'll be forced to run on and defend every crazy soundbite and bad policy that's already out there. Newsom has his California policies that have led to rampant homelessness and businesses leaving the state. AOC is tied to her socialistic Green New Deal vision, where the government plays a massive part in redistribution of money. Voters don't like either of those things. If they run a Gavin or an AOC, chances are high that they lose again. But if they run a moderate, common sense outsider like Stephen A., game changer. As a Republican hoping that Rubio takes the reins in 2028, nothing would scare me more than Stephen A. being the challenger. He could be the Democrat version of Trump, winning the election and resetting their party to something that the average American supports. Thank you for sticking around and watching until the end. If you made it this far, be sure to hit subscribe and like the video for more. I'm trying to build a brand based on honest, reasonable political takes, not the outrage that you see from so many other pundits on both sides of the aisle. If that sounds like something you want, be sure to subscribe and head to my Substack to get new releases emailed directly to your inbox. And drop a comment. Let me know if I'm spot on about Stephen A. or if I'm missing the mark. I want to know your thoughts. With that, I'll see you next time. Thank you.